Hey there, quick question. How often do you say things like I wake up early, she works here, or we love coffee? Guess what? You're already using one of the most powerful tenses in English, the simple present, and you might not even know it. In this video, I'll show you how the simple present shapes your daily conversations, helps you sound more natural, and makes English easy instead of confusing. Let's unlock it together. If we look at the simple present using a tree diagram, we can see that it's divided into two main types, the simple present with be and the simple present with other verbs. What characterizes the simple present with other verbs is the use of the auxiliary verbs do and does when we form negative sentences and questions. It's important to remember that we never use do or does with the verb be. The verb be forms negatives and questions by itself without the need for any auxiliaries. Both types of the simple present share the same three sentence forms: affirmative, negative, and questions. When it comes to questions, there are two kinds: yes-no questions and WH questions. Yes-no questions are questions that can be answered with yes or no, while WH questions begin with words like who, what, where, when, why, or how, and are used to ask for specific information. The verb be is very special because it follows its own rules, which is why it's placed on a separate side of the tree diagram, even though it's only one verb. All other verbs are grouped together on the other side because they follow the same set of rules in the simple present. We'll begin by explaining the simple present with be, starting with its forms and how it's used in different types of sentences. The simple present tense has many important uses in English. We use it to talk about habits and routines, like in the sentences, I wake up at 7 a.m. every day, or she drinks coffee every morning. Both show actions that happen regularly. We also use the simple present for general truths and facts, such as the sun rises in the east and water boils at 100 Celsius. These are statements that are always true and cannot change. Another use is to talk about permanent situations. Examples: he works at a bank. They live in New York. These examples show things that are stable and long-term. We even use the simple present for scheduled events in the near future, such as the train leaves at 6 p.m. or the concert starts at 8 o'clock, because these events are fixed by a timetable. The simple present is also used in commentaries or narrations. Examples: he enters the room and looks around. She scores a goal. These examples make the action feel immediate and exciting. Finally, the simple present expresses feelings, thoughts, and states, like I love chocolate, or he believes in honesty. These sentences describe emotions or beliefs that are generally true. Alright, let's now start by focusing specifically on affirmative sentences in the simple present with be, looking at their forms and how they are used in different contexts. In the simple present, affirmative statements with be are very easy to use. The verb be has three forms in the present tense: am, is, and are. We use am with I, is with singular third-person subjects like he, she, or it, are with plural subjects or with you, we, and they. The structure of an affirmative sentence with be is usually subject plus be plus complement. After the verb be, we usually add a complement which gives more information about the subject. The complement can be a noun, an adjective, or a prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase is a preposition followed by a noun. Examples: under the bed, at home, or in bed. Let's look at some examples to understand the structure better. She is a teacher. She is the subject. Is a form of be used with she. A teacher is a noun complement that gives information about the subject she. Another example: he is hungry. He is the subject of the sentence. Is a form of be used with he. Hungry is an adjective complement telling us how he feels. One more example that has a prepositional phrase: the children are at school. The children is the subject. Are is a form of be used with the plural noun the children. At school is a prepositional phrase telling us where the children are. In affirmative statements with be, we often use contractions to make sentences shorter and sound more natural, especially in spoken English. A contraction is when we combine the subject and the verb be into one shorter form. For example, with I, we say I am happy, which becomes I'm happy. With he, she, or it, we use is, as in he is a teacher, becomes he is a teacher. She is tired becomes she's tired, or it is cold becomes it's cold. With we, you, and they, we use are. For example, we are ready becomes we're ready. You are kind becomes you're kind. And they are at school becomes they're at school. Using contractions doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. It just makes it sound smoother and more natural in conversation. Contractions are very common in everyday English, so it's important to practice them and get used to hearing and using them. Now that we've seen affirmative statements, let's look at negative statements with be in the simple present. To make a sentence negative, we simply add not after the correct form of the verb be. The basic structure is subject plus be plus not plus complement. Just like in affirmative sentences, the complement can be a noun, an adjective, or a prepositional phrase. For example, in I am not a student, I is the subject, am not is the negative verb, and the student is a noun complement telling us what I'm not. In the sky is not blue, the sky is the subject, is not is the negative form of be, and blue is an adjective complement showing how the sky is not. And in he is not at home, he is the subject, is not is the negative verb, and at home is a prepositional phrase telling us where he isn't. Just like in affirmative sentences, we often use contractions in negative sentences with be to make them shorter and sound more natural, especially in spoken English. A contraction combines the verb be and not into one word or form. For example, I am not tired becomes I'm not tired. He is not ready becomes he isn't ready. She is not at home becomes she isn't at home. It is not cold becomes it isn't cold. We are not late becomes we aren't late. You are not hungry becomes you weren't hungry. and they are not students becomes they aren't students. These forms are very common in everyday English, so the more you practice them, the easier it will be to understand and use them when speaking. Now that we've looked at affirmative and negative sentences, let's see how yes-no questions with be work in the simple present. In these questions, we put the correct form of be at the beginning of the sentence, followed by the subject, and then the complement. The complement can be a noun, an adjective, or a prepositional phrase, just like we saw in affirmative and negative sentences. For example, in am I late, am comes first. I is the subject, and late is an adjective complement, asking about my state. In is he a doctor, is the verb, he is the subject, and the doctor is a noun complement, asking about his role. And in are we in the classroom, are is the verb, we is the subject, and in the classroom is a prepositional phrase asking about our location. These examples show that forming yes-no questions with be is simple. Just move be to the front of the sentence, keep the same types of complements, and you're ready to ask questions that can be answered with yes or no. Once we know how to ask yes-no questions with be, it's important to learn how to give short answers. Short answers are a quick way to answer a question with just yes or no, followed by the correct form of the verb be and the subject. For example, if someone asks, "Are they at school?" you can answer, "Yes, they are," or "No, they aren't." Notice that in affirmative short answers, we never use contractions, so we say, "Yes, they are," not "Yes, they're." In negative short answers, however, contractions like isn't or aren't are fine. Examples: "No, he isn't," or "No, we aren't." Now that we've learned about yes-no questions, let's move on to WH questions with be. WH questions start with words like who, what, where, when, why, or how to ask for specific information. The structure is similar to yes-no questions. We put the WH word first, followed by the correct form of be, then the subject, and optionally a complement, which can be a noun, an adjective, or a prepositional phrase. Sometimes we don't need a complement at all, depending on what information we're asking for. Let's look at some examples. Who is your teacher? Who asks for a person. Is the verb, and your teacher is the subject. What is this? What asks for information about a thing. Is the verb. This is the subject, and no complement is needed here. Where are they? Where asks about a place. Are is the verb, and they is the subject. Why is she sad? Why asks for a reason. Is the verb. She is the subject, and sad is an adjective complement. How are you? How asks about a state or condition. Are is the verb, and you is the subject. No extra complement is needed. There are also very common everyday WH questions that you will hear a lot, like what's your name, how old are you, or what's your phone number. These questions are used all the time in conversations and are great examples of WH questions with be in simple present that we use every day. Now let's look at adverbs of frequency and how we use them with the verb be in the simple present. Adverbs of frequency like always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, and never tell us how often something happens or how frequently a state or condition is true. When we use them with be in affirmative and negative sentences, the adverb usually goes after the verb be. For example, I am always happy shows that happiness happens all the time. And she is never late tells us that being late doesn't happen at all. In they are usually at school at 8 o'clock, the adverb usually indicates that being at school at that time happens most of the time. In questions, the placement is slightly different. The adverb comes after the subject. For example, are you always happy? Or is she never late? Now that we've covered the simple present with be, we'll move on to the simple present with other verbs. As we mentioned earlier, this type of the simple present is characterized by the use of the auxiliary verbs do and does when forming negative sentences and questions. These auxiliaries are necessary because, unlike be, other verbs cannot form negatives or questions on their own. Now let's look at affirmative statements with other verbs in the simple present. These are sentences that show regular actions, habits, or facts. Let's go through some examples with different subjects. For I, we can say, I play football. Here, I is the subject, and play is the base form of the verb, showing a regular activity. For you, we can say, you watch TV. You is the subject, and watch is the verb in its base form. For he, we can say, he plays football. He is the subject, and notice that we added s to the verb play because the subject is third person singular. For she, we can say, she watches TV. She is the subject, and we added es to the verb watch because of the spelling rule for verbs ending in ch. For it, an example could be, it rains a lot in spring. It is the subject, and we added s to the verb rain for the same reason as with he and she. For we can say, we play football. We is the subject, and the verb stays in its base form. For they, an example is, they watch TV. They is the subject, and the verb remains in the base form. As you can notice, we add s or es to the verb only when the subject is he, she, or it. For all other subjects, I, you, we, they, the verb stays in its base form. There are some spelling rules for adding s and es, which we'll explain now. Let's look at the spelling rules for adding s and es in the simple present when the subject is he, she, or it. Rule 1. For most verbs, just add s. Examples: play becomes plays, like becomes likes, read becomes reads. Rule 2. For verbs ending in ss, sh, ch, x, or o, we add es. Examples: press becomes presses, wash becomes washes, watch becomes watches, go becomes goes, and fix becomes fixes. Rule 3. For verbs ending in a consonant followed by a y, we change the y to I and add es. Examples: study becomes studies, carry becomes carries, try becomes tries. But if the verb ends in a vowel plus y, we just add s. So play becomes plays. Enjoy becomes enjoys. Rule 4. The verb have. The verb have is irregular in the simple present. For the pronouns he, she, and it, we don't add s. Instead, have changes to has. For example, I have a book. You have a book. But he has a book. For all other subjects, I, you, we, they, the verb stays have. Now let's look at negative sentences with other verbs in the simple present. The key thing to remember is that we use the auxiliary verbs do and does to make negatives. To make the sentence negative, we add not after do or does. We always use the base form of the main verb, even for he, she, or it, because the auxiliary already carries the tense. Let's go through some examples with each subject. I do not play football. You do not watch TV. He does not play football. She does not like pizza. It does not rain much in summer. We do not play football. They do not watch TV. As the examples show, we use does with he, she, and it, which are the third person singular pronouns, while we use do with I, you, we, and they. Notice that we can also use contractions in negative sentences. Do not becomes don't, and does not becomes doesn't. Now let's look at yes/no questions with other verbs in the simple present. The key thing to remember is that we use the auxiliary verbs do and does at the beginning of the question. After the auxiliary, we put the subject and then the main verb in its base form. Even for he, she, or it, the main verb stays in the base form because does already shows that the subject is third person singular. Let's see some examples. Do I study English every day? Do you like coffee? Does he work on Saturdays? Does she play the guitar? Do we visit our grandparents on Sundays? Do they enjoy swimming? Once we've asked yes/no questions with other verbs, it's important to know how to give short answers. A short answer is a quick way to respond with yes or no, followed by the auxiliary verb do or does and the subject. Look at these examples. The question is, do you like pizza? The answer would be, yes, I do, or no, I don't. Does he work on Saturdays? Yes, he does, or no, he doesn't. Now let's look at WH questions with other verbs in the simple present. These are questions that start with who, what, where, when, why, or how to ask for specific information. The structure is simple. We start with the WH word, then add the auxiliary verb do or does, followed by the subject, and finally the main verb in its base form. Just like in affirmative and negative sentences, the main verb stays in the base form even when the subject is he, she, or it. Remember, we always use does with he, she, and it, and do with I, you, we, and they. Here are some examples. What do you like to eat? Where do they live? Why does he wake up early? How does she get to school? Who do we invite to the party? Finally, let's focus on adverbs of frequency with other verbs in the simple present. As I said before, these are words like always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, and never, which tell us how often an action occurs. In affirmative sentences with other verbs, the adverb of frequency usually goes before the main verb. Look at these examples. I always eat breakfast. She often reads books in the evening. In negative sentences with do, does, the adverb of frequency goes after the auxiliary. Here are some examples. I don't usually eat breakfast early. He doesn't often watch TV. In yes, no, or WH questions, the adverb of frequency is placed after the subject. Examples: do you always eat breakfast? Does she usually read in the evening? It's important to remember that we never use never in negative sentences because never already has a negative meaning. Using it with another negative word like don't or doesn't would create a double negative, which is incorrect in standard English. For example, instead of saying I don't never eat breakfast, we simply say I never eat breakfast. That brings us to the end of our lesson on the simple present. We've covered everything from affirmative and negative sentences, yes, no, and WH questions, short answers, and adverbs of frequency. I hope this video has helped you understand the rules and patterns of the simple present and that you feel more confident using it in your own speaking and writing. Keep practicing and soon forming sentences in the simple present will feel completely natural. Thanks for watching and happy learning!